Hi, everyone. You read the title of this video. We're going to go straight into what I think about the many voices Granny Goodness has had over the years of her distribution and stuff like that.
Obviously, we're not going to count any comic book appearances because then we'd be here all day. We are mainly just counting the appearances where she has an actor or voice actor. Now, normally in these scenarios, I would play the clip for the audience to be able to hear what I'm getting at, but unfortunately, I'm not a member of DC. I don't have full permission to show these clips. All I am allowed to do is talk about them, which wish I could show them. That'd be a lot more fun, but I'm perfectly fine just going over the list of actors she's had over the years, say my honest thoughts and what I think is the best actor for Granny. So with that being said, we are going to be starting off with the most recent voice for the character. Back in 2019, Granny Goodness was included in the Young Justice series, where she was at this point voiced by Deborah Strang. Now, Deborah, I'm not going to knock your voice acting credits. I think you are a good voice actor, and given what you were told to do, I see what you were trying to do with Granny. I see it, but my main problem with this, by the way, when I'm speaking of these are not ranked in any particular order. You'll hear the ranking after I go over each of the voices. But Deborah Strang, not a terrible voice for the character at all, but it feels like she's missing something. Like, she has the crazy part down 100%. Granny is definitely a crazy nut. She has the evil part down. Granny's evil to the core, but then she loses everything else. That's why I can't fully give her performance of Granny the 10 out of 10. I could give it a 7 out of 10 as it hits the main areas, but the main thing that's preventing me from giving it any higher is the intimidation factor. It's just not there. It's just missing from the character. And again, I don't blame this on Deborah. I blame this on the directors. I feel had she been given, more proper direction for the character, she probably could have made the character sound scary. But as it is, it just makes the character sound like she's having an orgasm every 2 seconds. And it's, I don't know, not the best voice for her, but I could still rank it like a 7 out of 10. So next voice we're going to go over is Lainey Frazier. Lainey Frazier, also known for voicing Miles Tails Prower in the Sonic OVA, voices Granny in DC Universe Online. She's okay as the character. I'm going to put her and Kari Payton in the same category. The problem with discussing those voices is they have so little voice lines to begin with that it's kind of hard to rank them. That's why her and Kari are being put in the same category. The voice clips are there's definitely enough to gauge what the character would have sounded like. But again, because there is so little voice clips coming out of these particular portrayals, it don't make sense. Kari's was obviously meant to be a replacement for Ed. And Lainey is obviously doing her own thing. But the problem with Lainey's portrayal is very, well, you'll see this critique coming down later down the list, but her portrayal is very one note. And I could say the same thing about Kari, but the difference is Kari's only has a singular line in the entirety of his performance of Granny that lasts 8 seconds long. 8 seconds of screen time isn't exactly fair to judge. But from what I was able to gather from his voice, I think he could have been a good Ed, just didn't get the proper direction. So my thoughts on Lainey Frazier and Kari Payton, I would give Lainey about a 5 out of 5. The main reason is it's not a voice that particularly leaves an impression on you, and it's kind of just the stock voice, which again, that's what Lainey was told to do, and that's what we got. Kari, I can give him a 7 out of 10. I will give him a 7 out of 10 because I actually like the way the voice sounds, but I can't go any higher because there's so little voice clips of Kari's Granny. Next up is probably the one that people have the most mixed opinions on. That is April Stewart. April Stewart, amazing actress in her own right. Hello. She's great in South Park. She's great in many things. But we're not here to judge her acting career. We're here to judge the portrayal she gave to Granny Goodness. Now, I'm just going to start out by saying this is, for me, the one that feels the least successful of the Granny voices. She's pretty much stereotypical Granny 24/7 in her lines. And it's just not a voice that really sticks out, not a voice that particularly feels fitting for Granny, and just very much overall okay. Like I can't go beyond a okay rating for this. So if I were to give a rating to what's her name? Wait a second, April. If I were to give us a rating to April, I would say compared to everybody else, she would get a 4 out of 10. Not particularly a terrible voice, just not a particularly fitting voice for the character. Now, the next voice is the one she had in Lego Supervillains, Diane Delano. Diane Delano, when she gives her the voice, she gives parts of what I was missing from these other actors. She is evil, check. Crazy, check. Level of intimidation, it's there. It's not quite at the level I would personally put her at, but it's much closer than these previous actors have given. And Diane Delano gives a really solid performance as Granny. I'm not going to sit here and deny. I think Diane Delano as Granny is good. A little too similar to her Stampa at times, but overall good. Not my favorite voice for Granny, mind you, but good. I could still give this one a 7.5 out of 10. Just that extra oomph, just again, missing details to the character. So, obviously, we can't discuss Granny without discussing the OG actor. I saved him for last for a reason. We're going to be talking about Ed Asner's Granny. Ed Asner's Granny is, in my opinion, well, you'll see at the end of the rankings. But let me say what I love about this voice. Firstly, it gets the craziness down. It gets the evilness down. The intimidation factor is down. Like, it is to a fucking T. Like, every single line of dialogue this man does when he voices Granny feels natural. It doesn't feel put on. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like it's solely focusing on just that aspect of the character. No. When the character needs to be friendly, he's friendly. And he's friendly as her. When the character needs to be crazy, she's crazy. When the character needs to scream intimidation, oh boy, does he give you that. Every single line of dialogue she gives, especially in Superman Batman Apocalypse, I believe that's what the movie's called. That movie is the best showing of Ed's voice as Granny. Because we get to see Granny on a level we've never seen before. And this isn't to discount his earlier voice recordings of Granny either, because when he started voicing her in the Superman animated series, that was still a good voice clip. That was still, even if he's camping it up the whole time, even if he's making silly little one-liners like, "Don't just stand there, you ninny noodles." Like, he says, the thing about Ed is he has the most quotable lines from Granny on top of the voice pitch working. Like, literally, I still see people to this day. I still see majority of fellow Granny fans to this day quoting, "Don't just stand there, you ninny noodles! Finish her!" Everybody still quotes that line. Everybody still quotes the line, "It will now, pork chop." Like, everybody still quotes her. A lot of people quote that line. A lot of people quote the line from Justice League, too. Like, when he did that line where he just stayed in that fake happy tone that she was supposed to be given, only to get unhinged as the line keeps going. It's so good. Especially when he says the line, "Exactly. But if you find that prospect distasteful, wait till you see what Oberon looks like when I send him back to you. Piece by piece." Point being, Ed has quotable lines up the wazoo. Like, by far the most quotable lines from Granny. Not saying none of these other actors have quotable lines. They have quotable lines in their own right, but Ed's are the ones that stick out. Ed's are the ones that would make you laugh. That's another thing why I like Ed's Granny. He, on top of sounding evil, sounding unhinged and crazy, on top of sounding intimidating as fuck, he sells the comedy aspect of the character too. Which, again, doesn't come out in every single scene of her, but when it does, it usually lands. Like, this is a character that needs a voice like this. This is a character where there's a reason she sounded like this in her earlier outings. So if it hasn't already been obvious, my rating for Ed Asner's Granny, and of course I'm counting all of his appearances, counting the appearance, I think he appeared in 4 or 5 episodes of Superman, the animated series, all the episodes there, the singular episode he got to voice the character in Justice League, and that movie, Batman, Superman, Apocalypse. I'm counting all of those. Just like with the others, I'm counting the other portrayals of the character as well. So with that being said, Ed Asner is getting a 10 out of 10. I literally have no critiques on his voice for Granny. It just fits the character so well. So with that being said, we are now going to, oh, wait, hold on. I forgot a voice. Before we go to the ranking, let's go to the last voice I left out. That is Cloris Leachman. Cloris Leachman voiced her in Justice League Action. Cloris Leachman is a good actor in her own right, but as I said earlier with April, we are not judging her acting experience up to then. We are judging based on what she gives for the voice of Granny. And my problem with Cloris's voice for Granny, it is entirely one note. She sticks to one emotion the entire time, rarely deviates from it, and it's pretty much the same. It's like pretty much the same thing. What you see is what you get. With that being said, I would give her, I don't blame it on her. I blame it on the direction. So with that being said, Cloris, I would give, I guess I would give a 5.5 out of 5 for the role. Better than some earlier depictions of the character, but we'll see where it goes from here. So, with that being said, I'm now going to give you a ranking of who I think is the least impressive Granny and who I think is the most impressive Granny. If you've been paying attention to the video, it should be pretty obvious who number 1 is, but we'll pretend you don't know. So, coming in the last place, now this does not mean I dislike this actor. It does not mean I think she's horrible. As I said before, I gave this actor much praise. And honestly, oh, hello, Dragonfire. And honestly, with that being said, we are only judging the voices. So I would say the one that is the least successful on Granny would have to be April Stewart. Again, I think April Stewart herself, wonderful actor, does good when she does good, knocks it out of the park regularly. She's great on South Park. She's great on other shows. Just judging her voice on Granny Goodness, I would have to say it is the weakest because it is the least fitting for the voice. It fits within that version of the character, and that's it. That's why I would rank her as the weakest. So the second weakest voice for Granny, and this was a bit of a toss-up, but I ultimately had to go with what I thought for the role, what I thought fit the role. And as difficult as it was, I ultimately decided the second weakest, in my opinion, I should specify, in my opinion. If you disagree with any of these, it's perfectly valid to disagree. 100%. Just don't be rude about it. But if I had to pick the second weakest Granny, in my personal opinion, has to go to Lainey Frazier. Lainey Frazier is not a bad voice, not a terrible voice, just a voice that doesn't stick out in your mind. You're not going to remember, oh yeah, that voice was Granny. You're not going to remember her voice off the top of your head, especially given how few lines she's had as Granny. So with that being said, third weakest would have to be, this is why I said it was a toss-up, because I almost put these two in the same category. But I have to be honest, I'm only going off of the sounds of the voices. But the third weakest is going to have to be Deborah Strang. I feel she does better. She does better at matching the character than April and Lainey, but falls short in some areas. It doesn't mean she's bad as the character. Just to be clear, none of these voice actors I'm saying are bad as the character. Just doesn't have everything that the character is, and typically relies a little too much. Like, the main drawback from her Granny is it sounds like she's having an orgasm more so than she's crazy. That's my problem with Deborah Strang's portrayal of Granny. Deborah Strang and this next one almost got the same place, but I had to be fair. The next one, the fourth weakest one, yeah, I believe there's not really another one I can give this to. There's 7 voices. So if y'all have been keeping up, 7th place is April Stewart. 6th place is Lainey Frazier. 5th place is Deborah Strang. And now coming into 4th place, we would have Cloris Leachman. Cloris Leachman, as I've said before, I think does do a decent portrayal of Granny, and I do think it is better than the previous voices. But my main problem with Cloris, and why I can't rank her higher than 4th, is Cloris sounds very one note. That's the biggest drawback. She doesn't have very much on-screen time to flesh out the emotions that she has. She kind of sticks to one emotion the entire time when she voices the character, and very rarely ever deviates. And on top of that, the character's voice is monotone, which is something you should never do as Granny. Granny's never been monotone. But it is a slightly better performance than Deborah. Again, I almost ranked them the same, but I had to be fair. So this one was a real tricky one to rate, because I actually like the top 3 voices. Like, these are the best ones. But I had to be fair. So coming in the number 3 spot, and again, number 1 was a clear, obvious answer for me. But number 2 and 3, I had to really think about this. I had to really think, does this make sense? But ultimately, I decided number 3 has to go to Diane Delano. Diane Delano is, again, of the multiple women that have voiced Granny in recent years, I feel she is the one that gets the closest to what I look for in a traditional Granny voice. Has the intimidation, has the insane personality, has the sadistic personality and isn't afraid to get campy, isn't afraid to throw jokes around if she has to. And again, has that intimidation factor. The only reason she's not ranked any higher is because I personally would have preferred if her voice was deeper and just a bit more intimidation. That's the only reason. But she's third place. She's good for the character. I just wish there was, just that extra oomph to the character. Coming in the second place would be Khary Payton. I know his role as Granny was the shortest. He only got a singular line to voice her, and that singular line is about 8 seconds long. But truthfully told, Khary Payton's Granny is a very close matchup to who you'll see number one is in a second, but it's a very close matchup. It has the deepness I'm looking for. It has the intimidation I'm looking for. But the problem is, again, I can't rank it any higher because we only got an 8-second clip. Again, it was a toss-up between second and third place for Diane and Khary, but I had to give it to Khary because Kari's voice gets closer. So with that being said, first place should be, to the surprise of no one, is Ed Asner. Ed Asner as Granny truly was one of the best casting choices of the time. It truly was. Again, he nails the character in every single aspect of it. Gets the campiness down to a T. Gets the sadistic nature down to a T. Gets the batshit insane personality perfect. And then the biggest selling point for me, the intimidation. Obviously, this man is the most intimidating of the group who's voiced Granny. Every single line that has been said by Ed as Granny always has that level of uncertainty, that level of shivers down your spine. And I like that. I like the dimension that he gives to her. He sounds just like just you feel uneasy. If you were to hear a real life Granny with that voice, you'd get that cold sweat down your shoulder, that shiver down your spine. And on top of that, Ed has, I said it earlier in the video, I'll say it again, Ed has the most quotable lines from Granny on top of that. His voice acting of Granny is the one that almost everybody remembers. Almost everybody remembers it because of how iconic it was. He literally, every single line, even if it's something as silly, if it's something as silly as "Don't just stand there, you ninny noodles, finish her," even something as silly as that, he sells. He sells every aspect of it. And this is why I feel personally that he is the best Granny. That is the best voice for Granny. Knocks out every category. Intimidation, knocked out of the park. Sadism, knocked out of the park. Insane, knocked out of the park. Campiness, knocked completely out of the park. Quotable lines, again, I just said like 3 of them earlier. There's more. He's just so good for this character. This is why Ed Asner definitely has to be number 1. Definitely has to be number 1. So with that being said, I've said my thoughts on the voices of Granny over the years. I still want to add one more thing. What I think would be a perfect direction for Granny. I actually do think that there are three actors in mind that I think would be perfect for the role of Granny. And I don't see very many people talking about it. Because Granny's voice over the years has not been the most consistent. Ed Asner voiced her for a very long period of time in his career, but after Ed Asner stopped voicing the characters never had a consistent set of voice actors. And I think it would be nice if she did have a consistent voice actor. Yes, Ed Asner is the version I often practice. I think three actors would be perfect if they were to do a recast for Granny. I think it'd be interesting if Kari Payton got a second chance to voice the character and got better direction. I think he could easily be up there with Ed and the others. If we had to pick a woman, the one woman I think would be perfect to voice Granny would be Pat Carroll. Pat Carroll knocks it out of the park as Ursula in The Little Mermaid, and I think she would be great as Granny. She would be the one woman I feel could match the level of intimidation that Ed's version gives. And the last character voice actor that I think would do great for Granny is somebody by the name of Brock Chalmers. Brock Chalmers, he's done multitude of things, but I guess the thing he's most popular for at the moment is voicing Dahlia in Carol and Tuesday. Brock Chalmers, Dahlia, the voice he does for Dahlia is so good. Like, that sounds not exactly spot on to Ed's Granny, but I think if given the proper direction, he could sound like Granny. He could sound like Ed's Granny. And that's what I think. That's what I think on the multitude of Granny voices over the years. What I think would be a good direction to go for the character would be, again, Kari Payton probably could get a second chance. Pat Carroll, if you are required to have the character voiced by a woman again, which is fine. But if you want to match Ed's pitch, Brock Chalmers, get him. He can do it. So this has been Kunimitsu. Thank you for joining. This went on a little longer than expected, but I guess that's what happens when you're scatterbrained. All right, so Kunimitsu signing out.